And well, to continue on topic of this proxy war that West is waging against Russia, we have statement from Zelensky, who basically, effectively dismissed the Russian peace memorandum. Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky has refused to seriously consider Russia's latest peace proposal, dismissing it as an unacceptable ultimatum. And you know what? Okay, then let's continue. That's the answer, by the way. And this is obviously not Zelensky's take. This is a position of the globalists and globalist control regimes in the collective West, from Washington to London, Berlin, Paris, and the rest of them, right? We all knew that, and I was saying about it for how long now, that globalists or their allies in US, neocons, they are not ready yet to admit that they have lost this proxy war against Russia. So as long as they are not ready to face the reality, they will continue to escalate. They will continue to sacrifice more and more people that were unlucky enough to be a citizen of this quasi-state and creation of Bolsheviks under the name of Ukraine. And well, on this topic, by the way, we have this report from RIA Novosti that in a couple of weeks' time, Germany and German militaries might begin launching their long-range missiles deep into Russian territory, to strike deep into Russian territory. So the Ukrainian armed forces will soon receive their first long-range weapons produced in Ukraine, in quotes, by the way, allegedly produced in Ukraine, with the help of Berlin, claims German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius. His speech was broadcasted on the NATO website. And we have quote here: a significant amount of long-range weapons could be produced this year. The first systems could be deployed in the Ukrainian armed forces in a few weeks, he said ahead of a meeting of the bloc's defense ministers in Brussels. And of course, dear friends, we all understand that no matter how NATO countries are being, Germany or UK or US or France or anyone else, going to disguise these long-range weapon systems built in Ukraine or on the Mars or on Jupiter's one of the moons. We all know that these are NATO weapon systems, NATO long-range missiles, and they're not going to fool nobody. Once they will start launching, conducting massive launches of these long-range weapon systems, yet again, Moscow will retaliate in kind, I guess, right? Because, as I already said, I think leadership of Russian Federation is in a position when no matter how much they would love to see the escalation, there is no prospect of that for now, and there would not be such a prospect even on the horizon until Western ruling class will be ready to acknowledge their defeat, right? So therefore, Moscow will have to retaliate, and retaliate strong. And retaliations only on Kiev-controlled territory, as we already see dozens of times, by the way, does not really influence calculus of the globalists or the Western ruling class, right? Because they are not in danger. They don't care. They can prolong this proxy war against Russia as long as there is anybody on Kiev-controlled territory that can be thrown into this furnace of this proxy war, right? And one may ask, what is going to be next phase of escalation after these long-range missiles? I mean, how far collective West might go? And I said many times before, dear friends, that next phase of escalation is an attempt to transform Kiev regime into a nuclear-armed regime, and work in this direction has already been done. It's too clear for me personally, because there was dozens of statements by Western public figures, dozens of articles on very same topic in big names in Western media, Western propaganda outlets, right? And this was done for a reason. This is not random developments, right? Such stuff is not happening randomly. So this is a clearly part of the calculus of the globalists. But yet again, I mean, every time they will escalate, Moscow will, from now on, I guess, Moscow will respond in kind, right? And if globalists will go ahead, globalists and Western ruling class will go ahead with their transformation of Kiev regime into a nuclear armed regime. And I'm afraid UK and US militaries already have developed quite a number of atomic bombs, by the way, basic atomic bombs with radioactive materials that were generated in reactors inside the Ukraine for decades, by the way, during the decades of operations of these reactors, since the Soviet era, obviously. So I'm afraid number of basic atomic bombs already being developed, assembled by UK and US militaries and the scientists, and I don't think they will ever hand these weapons to Kiev regime. They will hold on to it, and if they will dare to use it, even in that case, British and US specialists will use this. They will never hand this weapon to Kiev regime. In my personal opinion, they will hide behind the back of Kiev regime. They will just say that it was them, not us, right? That's the calculus on their part, as far as I can tell, because they cannot trust, by the way, Kiev regime with such a weapon, because who knows, they will give them 10, 15 atomic bombs, and one bomb then might blow up in Berlin somewhere or in London. You just never know, right? So they will hold on to those weapons until the last moment, right? They will never give it to Kiev regime. They will just use Kiev regime as a shield, as a plausible deniability shield, right? We all understand that. But yet again, this game also can be played by both sides. And if globalists and neocons in US, Western ruling class will dare to go ahead with this next phase of escalation, then I think West will face also tremendous risks. Tremendous risks. And as we all know, by the way, Western world has plenty of enemies, right? They kill so many people worldwide just in the last couple of decades, by the way. NATO countries killed millions of people, right? And displaced tens of millions of people worldwide in the Middle East, in Africa, elsewhere. So they have plenty of enemies, right? That would love to acquire some dirty bombs to avenge for their families, for their loved ones, for their homelands, right? So globalists should know that. Globalists should know that. And also one important topic on this very matter. Probably you all noticed, dear friends, that recently there is a quite intensified relation, intensified trips between Moscow, between Russia and North Korea, which is nuclear maybe not a superpower, but which is nuclear power, by the way, nevertheless, right? And yesterday I reported, and I shared information on my Telegram and Twitter X page, that Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, yet again arrived in Pyongyang, Pyongyang, as we say here, capital of North Korea, to meet with the leader of the DPRK to discuss the implementation of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty. And by the way, I think this intensified dialogue between Moscow and Pyongyang is definitely not just about some economical partnership or military partnership in regards to, let's say, some artillery shells to be transported from North Korea to Russia, or the artillery systems. Something else might going on also. And I think North Korea had enough of their Western pressure. One should also keep in mind that North Korea is under Western sanctions for since the end of Korean War, basically. Since the pause, actually, in the Korean War. This war never ended. Peace treaty was never signed, right? War was just paused. posed by sides. And yes, if Western ruling class will go ahead with the transformation of Kiev regime as the next phase of escalation with Russia into nuclear armed regime, then, well, as I said, there are plenty of countries, plenty of people and groups of people in this world that would love to revenge their loved ones that were killed by NATO countries in last decades. And, they might one day acquire some devastating weapons, This game can be played both sides, both ways. So, I mean, it's better for the citizens of the Western countries, by the way, to wake up, because their leadership is pushing this war towards total disaster, man, total disaster. And what is interesting? Last several days, especially after NATO attack on Russian nuclear triad, I have seen quite a number of statements from the Western experts, from former and even current officials and militaries in the West, that were calling for a restrained Western world, because they are realizing that Western ruling class went just too far, and they are realizing that if collective West continues on this direction, entire world gonna end up in a deep trouble, including Western world, that would not survive, right? And they understand, they are experts, they understand that Western world would not survive, right? It's not on another planet, it's still on this planet, right? So yes, I mean, that's what is happening, dear friends. Obviously, I think majority of society worldwide is interested now and focused on potential Russian retaliation. And as I said, we should not expect anything right now, today, tomorrow, day after. I think Russia will take some action against Kiev regime's military and logistical infrastructure. And it is absolutely not necessary that Russia will openly strike some military assets of NATO countries that were involved in this attack on Russian nuclear triad. No. Why would Russia do that, right? But sometime in relatively near future, something is definitely going to happen to very important military assets of involved countries, involved NATO member states, involved in this terrorist attack on Russian nuclear triad. That's how it's going to play out, I think. So if anyone expects that Russia is going to strike, I don't know, in London, it's not going to happen, by the way. No. Plausible deniability, as I said, is something that can be used by everybody, really, if it comes to it. So, okay, let's start with this one here. Vzгляд newspaper is reporting that Russian troops liberated Kondratovka settlement in the Sumy region and Redkadub settlement in DPR. This is information that officially confirmed now as a part of a progress of the Russian armed forces in the zone of special military operation. Let me show you these areas, dear friends. So this is a Redkadub settlement in the DPR, right on the border with the Kharkov region. Important development, obviously. And when it comes to Sumy region, dear friends, Russian troops are intensifying their offensive in the Sumy region. Buffer zone is created there extensively. And this is a Kondratovka settlement that is under full Russian control now. And also reports are coming in that Russian troops are entered Novokonstantinovka settlement and are conducting clearing operation now in this village. And probably before end of this day or tomorrow, Russian Defense Ministry will confirm that this settlement is also under Russian control. Forward units of the Russian armed forces and the DRGs already are operating in Stepove area, and Stepove also could be liberated in next 12 to 24 hours. And also Russian troops are, DRGs already are operating in Yastrebina settlement. Significant progress of the Russian armed forces, and most likely it's only a matter of several days, maximum week or two, and all the settlements, by the way, in the Sumy region from a border to this forestry will be liberated by Russian forces. It will take maybe week or two, but progress speed of Russian advance is such that probably it would not take more than a couple of weeks to liberate entire this area here. So significant progress for sure. And also, dear friends, previous night Russian forces were conducting long-range precise strikes on military and logistical infrastructure of the Kiev regime in many directions. And for example, in the Kherson region, I shared video confirmation, for example, on my Telegram and Twitter X page this morning that administrative building was targeted with airstrike this morning, and well, quite severe damage was done. And I guess if that building was used, and most likely that building was used by Kiev regime's military forces, they had suffered significant losses, because if you take a look at the video, explosions are just massive. So that's when it comes to progress of the Russian armed forces. Obviously, initiative is in Russian hands all along the front line, from Sumy region to Kherson direction, and in no circumstances, in no universe, Kiev regime and its NATO backers will be able to regain initiative anywhere on the line of contact. That being said, let me also give you information, which is, I think, interesting one too, that, well, as a result of Russian long-range precise strike in Odessa region, point of concentration of Kiev regime's forces and their NATO mercenaries was targeted, and Kiev regime suffered about 50 casualties, among them French-speaking mercenaries. So maybe unit of French special forces were neutralized as a result of this strike, either from French Foreign Legion or maybe some other special forces. But you know, significant losses, let's say, on part of France also, not just this Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. And also interesting news, I think, that I shared on my Telegram and Twitter this morning, that well, Russian armed forces captured another two US-made M1A1 Abrams tanks, by the way, in the Sumy region, and evacuated these vehicles. Evacuation of one of those vehicles being depicted in the video that I shared this morning. I guess at this point, probably Russian side has more Abrams tanks than Kiev regime. That's how many of these tanks been either destroyed or captured, right? You know, something interesting, I guess. And also, dear friends, if you are subscribed to my Patreon or on my Twitter X or Telegram channel, probably you have seen video that I shared this morning, which was filmed by Russian drone in Pokrovsk direction, I believe that was, when this so-called barrier troops, which is, you know, mainly consists neo-Nazi formations and the NATO mercenaries. In that video, you can see how these barrier troops are executing Ukrainian soldiers that were probably refusing to obey orders or retreated from some position. And well, these kind of actions being used by Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky regularly, and such videos are appearing time after time, right, of execution of their own military personnel to somehow keep discipline. But it does not work, by the way. It simply does not work. But these atrocities are documented in many cases, and hopefully one day these criminals, these mass murderers and the terrorists that are executing their own comrades, hopefully they will pay heavy price for their crimes. And this kind of actions does not work because, for example, Maria Zakharova, by the way, official representative of Russian Foreign Ministry, did share their information with public that, for example, since the beginning of 2025, more than 25,000 people have deserted from the Ukrainian army, which is significantly exceeds last year's figure. And also, and this is, by the way, regular occurrence. I will say at least 25,000, because this number could be like twice more, 3 times more. We all remember recent story when highly advertised brigade of Kiev regime that went for training in France or something like that, lost about 70% of its personnel due to desertion. Some 70% of personnel, by the way, flee the unit. So therefore, I think this number is much higher in reality. And also, Maria Zakharova shared with public some additional interesting information with her stats. So Zakharova also cited information from the Ministry of Economy of Ukrainian side, that 104,000 people have fled abroad since the beginning of the year. And according to Zakharova, over the past 3 years, from 600,000 to 1 million citizens of working age have left the country. And we are talking about males, by the way, mainly. Males that were either drafted or received their notice of mobilization, and they are running away, by the way. Up to 1 million people escaped from being forcefully mobilized, and there are somewhere, in Europe. Some of them maybe are already in Russia too, by the way, because many people are escaping to EU countries, and then from there are flying to Russia and asking for asylum, and eventually, if they have never participated in a criminal activity, they are getting Russian citizenship if they want to, by the way. And I'm talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I'm not talking about like few individuals. I'm talking about thousands of people that are escaping to Europe first, and then from Europe are coming to Russia. Interesting data, isn't it? To continue, dear friends, well, as long as still there is anybody left in Kiev-controlled territory, globalist controlled regimes in the West, being, Washington regime, London regime, Paris, Berlin, others, they will continue to prolong this proxy war and to sacrifice these people that yet again were unlucky enough to be citizens of this quasi-state, right, on the name of Ukraine. And for that reason, for example, UK is pledges to send 100,000 new drones to Kiev regime to prolong this proxy war. So the UK has pledged to supply 100,000 new drones to Ukraine by April 2026, in addition to the 10,000 drones it sent last year. The announcement coincides with Britain's newly unveiling strategic defense review, which proposes steps to rearm its military in light of what it paints as a threat posed by Russia. Yeah, Russia, by the way, they're gonna put Russia everywhere, by the way. They're gonna justify literally everything with their imaginary Russian threat. While in reality, if anyone side is threatening this world, is a collective West. And that's why collective West has to be isolated, by the way, by rest of the world, man. It's just absolutely necessary, right? So, yes, that's what UK does, by the way. That's what UK's leadership does. And, well, I think they should get ready for what is about to happen. UK's government, that is, and potentially UK's militaries and intelligence services. Because if they were thinking that they're gonna commit terrorist attacks against Russia with impunity, well, they were mistaken, and big time. That was a fatal mistake of UK. Anyways, dear friends, of course, no matter how many weapons or how much money Western ruling class and their puppet regime is going to send to the Kiev regime, they will not be able to turn the tide. It's just not happening. No way. But unfortunately, they are well capable of prolonging this proxy war and sacrificing more and more people. First of all, on Kiev controlled territory. And on this very topic, dear friends, well, let me give you this news that Ukrainian parliament has passed a draft law in the first reading allowing men over 60 to sign a military service contract. Well, nothing screams success like drafting kids and their senior citizens for a combat, isn't it? Do I have to add any more commentary on that? Soon, probably, this law will be adopted fully, and Kiev regime will start mobilizing elderly people, by the way, pensioners, basically. And I'll give you additional information. Recently, as I said several times in previous updates, Kiev regime initiated a new campaign to attract a young generation with money, with some assistance with their housing and so on, to join armed forces. And in last several months, you know how many people sign up in Kiev controlled territory, how many youngsters from 18 to 25? About 500. About 500. I feel sorry for those 500 people because they are just too stupid, really. And we already have seen some videos, isn't it? When these young people, terrified in terrifying conditions, have been imprisoned by Russian troops. I mean, what they were thinking, man, what they were thinking. But still, 500, it's not 50,000 and not 500,000, isn't it? And definitely not a million. So that program failed completely. And now the regime wants to trick pensioners to go and die for this terrorist regime of Zelensky and the geopolitical agenda of the West. I hope elderly people with their life experience behind them will not fail for this trick. But who knows, man? Who knows? Maybe some elderly people will say, you know what, they have lived the life, and they will actually sign up a contractor by knowing perfectly well that they are going to die. But probably they will, if they are going to receive some money on the day they sign up, well, they might do it for their relatives. So therefore, a number of elderly people, pensioners that will sign up for Kiev regime's forces once this law is fully adopted can be higher than number of youngsters that sign up. But overall, I mean, you get their picture, isn't it? You can understand what the hell what a hellhole Kiev controlled territory is really for the people, ordinary people that are forced to live and survive under this terrorist regime of Zelensky. And it's not just UK, by the way. Of course, almost all the other NATO member states are involved in this attempt to prolong this proxy war against Russia. And Netherlands, for example, is one of the big sponsors of this proxy war, and they promised Kiev regime another 400 million euros in military aid package, which will include drones and boats. Well, it is unfortunate that all this stuff is happening, but well, it is what it is, man. Collective West is a threat for entire world, and needs to be dealt accordingly, and at least isolated, so that they would not be able to harm this world as much as they are doing right now, and for the last several centuries, by the way, at least. Hello everyone, I hope you find informative and useful this short clip. from main news update, and if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. It might help to deal with the algorithm and reach wider audience. And if you like my work in general and want to support to save this media project, you can assist through several ways. You can donate to this project through PayPal platform or Boosty, also with the crypto currencies, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page and page on Boosty, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And of course, many thanks to everyone who already helped and continues to support. Thank you.